appreciate your presence on today. From what I've been told, masks are mandatory. So when I'm not standing here, I'm going to fall in line and wear mine. And I want to encourage you to do the same as we continue to work through this pandemic. We certainly are pleased and thrilled to have assembled together yet again to hear another word about what God, I'm hopeful, is going to say to us today through his word. So I want you to go to Acts 2 and Matthew 4, and we're going to be there in just a minute. I'll be with you here teaching through the 25th of September, and we're going to be looking at evangelism in a number of different ways from a number of different perspectives. That's something that I can talk about in my sleep. I just thoroughly enjoy it. And I'm finally at a point in my ministry where I think I can use all the mistakes and pluses and minuses and things I've learned to be a part of really helping to develop some things that are special with regards to evangelism. If ever there was a time where we needed to be evangelistic, that time has come. That time has come. And I am so grateful that God is giving me and us an opportunity to be a part of helping to continue to share his message, which is the message of redemption with the world. So that's what we're going to be on today. So with that being said, let's start with the word of prayer. Shall we bow? Our great God, we come to you today, thankful for the traveling grace that you've bestowed upon us all as we've assembled here. Even those in cyberspace, we want to say good morning. Grateful are we that we can assemble and study your word. We are praying, oh God, that what we prepared today will be encouraging to this thy people. We are mindful of the power of your word, knowing that as far back as Genesis 1, where you spoke the world into existence, your word still has that same power. Speak to us today, oh God. Create in us, oh God, new hearts, new minds, new lives. We are so thankful again for those that are present. May our hearts be open. In the name of Christ, we do pray. Amen. So one of the things I tried to do last week is I tried to give you a consistent look at two styles of evangelism. One is the Acts 2 model. You could probably say that the Acts 2 model in more general religious Christian settings, that's the Billy Graham kind of idea where you pull together a number of people. Now, of course, we don't necessarily pay that movement a lot of respect, and we've kind of did our own thing, and we call it the Crusade for Christ. And for a number of years, our leading apologist, which is a person that specializes in the defending of the faith, at least that's how we mean it, with regard to basic doctrine and teaching. Jack was a prolific communicator, and he preached all over the world. So he would come into a city, do the Crusade for Christ, and many would come to Christ. So that's more of a quicker kind of shotgun style approach. There are some benefits to that, in that it's very easy to put together a big program, have a nice cutting edge flyer, and get your friends and family to come to visit on that particular day or maybe during that particular week. That's pretty easy to do, especially if you have the resources to bring in a good group and a good speaker. When I was in Phoenix, we had the largest gathering that the churches of Christ, the African American churches of Christ, have ever had in the history of the church in that particular state. And that was done with promotion and marketing, and we had the Southside Singers, and I'm gonna tell you, they came in and they tore it up. I mean, that's just all I can say. So that's not that hard. The problem is our ability to benefit from that seems to be limited. And I made the point last week that we really don't read a lot about specific individuals that came out of that Acts 2 movement. Now, we do know that the church, for the most part, was headquartered in Jerusalem. That's where Peter and the rest of the apostles, for the most part, dwelled and kind of orchestrated things, or at least they were a point of reference. So we do know that. But in terms of, notable men and women that came to know the Lord, we really don't read a lot. So I'm gleaning from that though that is a bona fide biblical approach, it really does not lend itself statistically, I think, and even historically, to more longer term type growth. And I wanted you to compare Acts 2 to what Jesus is going to show us in Matthew chapter 4. And in Matthew chapter 4, we see the call of Peter and company. What is interesting is, beginning with Peter, those guys turned the world upside down. And it had everything to do with the way that they were evangelized, with the way that they were introduced and brought into the Christian movement. Now, unfortunately, Brother Walker was kind enough to help me with my outline, but I couldn't get it printed. So when Sister Stephanie gets here, there she is, I think she can send it up to me. But until then, I'm going to have to go with my looking at my phone, and I try to make eye contact with you. But oh, thank you. That just shows you how much I am. Okay. So thank you. So Matthew 4, I want to suggest to you, is where it is. Matthew 4 is where it is. So when I think about developing what I'm going to call a more of a intense style of evangelizing, we can do Acts 2, but our results are going to be in Matthew 4. Now, here's the thing. Acts 2, they baptized 3,000 people, and we love being obsessed with numbers. Matthew 4, all you see is just a handful of people, but those people turn the world upside down. So one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is, which outcome do we want? Do we want a situation where we can have a campaign and baptize a couple hundred people? Of course. I mean, who wouldn't want that? However, we shouldn't put all of our eggs in that basket, because statistically and historically, those people that come without adequate preparation are not going to stay. It's going to be those Matthew 4 people. Now, you don't see anyone really in a leading type role except Jesus. Now, that will eventually change as he decreases and as Peter and the rest of those guys in Acts 2 come on the scene. But for the most part, we see Jesus being the one kind of directing this whole evangelism strategy. Now, what's crucial about that, and I really don't mean no harm. I really don't mean no harm. And you all will get to know me as I get to know you. But I'm at a point in my ministry to where I need to be more truthful. And I need to be more honest about what I'm thinking and what I'm seeing. The pandemic changed a lot for me. One is to stop being so diplomatic and just tell people the truth. And it's not that I haven't told them the truth. I've just been very, very measured and how I would go about communicating the truth. So I'm done with that. I'm just going to tell you what I'm thinking. You know, I mean well, I love you. I know you love me, but sometimes we got to hear it like it is. We got to see it like it is. My point here is that this evangelism thing, it's difficult to be led by a committee or a group of people. Doesn't mean it can't be, but it's very difficult to get people all geared toward the same goal. Now, Jesus's strategy was to develop leaders. I still think that's the model today. I still think that you need to have a committed individual leading and driving who is sold out to this concept of evangelism as a strategy. Our problem is we don't have many people that are sold out. We don't. I shared with you last week about a friend of mine. His name is Brother Pugh. And I told you how in a couple of weeks he baptized over 100 people in Phoenix. It was shocking. And I was with him for most of that. Now I'm 52. He's probably in his 60s. He ran circles around me with his energy. Ran circles around me. He slept at the church. Literally. That's all he did. Every waking minute was plan, adapt, Bible study, plan, adapt, cook, Bible study, plan, adapt, call, go visit. That's all he did. Now, I have seen some other dynamic evangelists. My dad is one. He doesn't do as much as he used to back in his more youthful years, but he's got that gift. Brother Lee Crow, Brother Hawkins and I both share some kinship with Inglewood. Crow was one of the best to ever do it. But those guys are very, very few. So my suggestion to us today is we got to raise up some men and women who have this as their primary way of thinking about their lives. It's difficult, but it can be done. And I want to be a part of trying to develop a style of this today. So Jesus's success, and here's my point, Jesus's success began with Jesus. Our success using the Matthew 4 approach will begin with whoever we have in that driver's chair. We can only produce what we are. So if you're a church leader and you're not an evangelist, more than likely you are in the way. That's not to say that there aren't other meaningful ways that you can contribute, but this is a unique calling. You actually see this in Brother Hogan's generation. I'm not a church historian, but I've read a little bit and I've been a lot of places. Men and women in Hogan's era, they were the Matthew 4, and they did like a blending of Matthew 4 and Acts 2, but those folk were sold out. You don't develop what we have today that people like myself are still eating from that tree without that kind of approach. So part of what I want you to do is I want you to think 2,000 years from now. 2,000 years from now, they should be eating, members of the church, if we're still around, from the work we do today. All right, so okay, is this my clicker here? All right, so I need to try to get further than what I'm doing. All right. There is a distinction between membership and discipleship. We have taught membership, but we've not really taught discipleship. Membership is much easier to obtain because you talk about people having some kind of joining ritual and then they're in the club. And that's often how we present the church. The problem is is though there would be aspects of the establishing and development of the church that we'd see, that's not really what the Christian movement is all about. The Christian movement is all about discipleship. So if we have an approach that's built around people being part of a club, we're kind of doomed from the beginning, because it's difficult for us to have longer term, meaningful, vibrant growth with people kind of celebrating just quote unquote membership. You know, you could say we give our offering every week, those would be club dues. Man, I want to encourage you to resist talking about our existence as being members. I want to encourage you to strike that term from your vocabulary. It's not that we're not members, we are members, but we often associate that with the club, and that's harmful to us. We are disciples. We are lifelong learners. Everything about us needs to exude discipleship. So when we gear ourselves toward being disciples versus being members, then it's a game changer in terms of the way we look at our lives. You see, the Great Commission in Matthew 28:19-20, where it says, "Go ye therefore," teach and baptize and teach again. That's a poor translation in the King James. It really should be "as you go," which means it's a lifestyle. Everywhere that we go, we should be teaching, baptizing, and teaching again. We get up in the morning, we go out, we're watering our lawn. I don't know how much watering we do with this drought, but we're watering our lawn and our neighbor's out doing the same, and we're connecting with him or her. We're not connecting with him or her to talk about LeBron and this stupid trade with Patrick Beverly. Who cares about that? Who really cares? I mean, I talk about it, I enjoy it, but at the end of the day, LeBron ain't gonna do. If I ever needed something, do you think I could call LeBron? How much time do we spend wasting on things that have no eternal value? So if I do bring up LeBron with my neighbor, I'm only using LeBron as a carrot, as a means to teach, to baptize, and to teach again. That's how a disciple lives. Everything in their lives revolves around teaching, baptizing, and teaching again. Our challenge is, and why our churches are often struggling today, and I talk about this as a person who's been a member of the church, a person who has been a leader in the church. I've been an elder, I've been a minister, I've been a senior minister, I've been an associate minister, I've been a music minister, I've been a youth minister, I've driven the van, I've done just about everything you can do. So I'm not talking about this in a way where I'm not indicting myself. I'm just telling you that if we're going to have a dynamic, vibrant, growing spiritual environment, we have to resist membership and we have to latch on to discipleship. Disciples live daily with Jesus on their mind and Jesus in their hearts. There are no breaks. Why? Because it's a lifestyle. So now, does that mean that every literal waking minute, I'm concerned about the lost and I'm concerned about how God's using me? Well, that might sound fanatical, but that's exactly what Jesus did. When you read through the Gospels, you're going to see that discipleship revolved around Jesus spending time with Peter, James, John, and the rest of his apostles. They didn't do this 8 hours a day. They pretty much lived together. They had scenes in the marketplace. They had scenes in the synagogue. They had scenes in the street. They had scenes at the lake or the sea. They would be traveling together to do different things. And why do you see all those environments? Because for the most part, they live together. Those guys were together day in. Now, will all of that translate to today? Well, of course not. But my point is that there is some intentionality in our lives about being available to be trained and to be used of God to be instrumental in other people coming to Christ. I'm going to get you just a minute. It is vital that you know that we can trace our vibrancy and effectiveness back to the concern and prioritization of the leadership and the membership. So our lack of vibrancy, our lack of growth, our lack of energy, you can always trace that back to who's leading. Now, I'm going to tell you again, I don't mean any harm. I'm indicting myself as well, because it's very difficult leading in this role. But just because it's difficult, it don't mean it's impossible. And we have to do a better job, I'm suggesting to you, of making some A's and not F's in such an important area. Now, I like how Jesus said, and I'm going to get you just a minute, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. That is the greatest thing that can be carved on your gravestone. Is what is said about Sister so-and-so, what is said about so-and-so is that he was a fisher of men. One of the things I loved about Brother Crow is that whenever you would help bring a person to the Lord, he was so great at celebrating that. You know, he had his quiet demeanor. I mean, he was just a master. And of course, he would be great at talking to the person that obeyed the gospel, but he really spent time talking about that brother or that sister that brought them to the Lord, and he would give them a little what? Fish hook. And man, you know, I wore that fish hook until it faded and broke. I was so proud of that fish hook. So I'm suggesting to you that we have to get back to celebrating and emphasizing and being energetic in such an important area. Yes, sir. I think that's a wonderful question. And I think we ought to spend some time kicking that idea around and planning it out. Now, I think generally speaking, when a person comes to know the Lord, they are most open at that time to evangelizing friends and family. So this is just a preview. Part of what I think we ought to do is to have a strategy where if John obeys the gospel, John is put into an approach where he's sharing the same message with his brother and his sister, and that might be a process. So that could be part of it. Maybe we have some other things. So I see exactly what you're saying. It's like, okay, we go through all this trouble and we get him here. Now what? now what do we do? Okay. So I'm not going to give you the answer, but I'm saying that would be a good exercise for those of us who are committed to this, to sit down and say, okay, you know, how can we do this? What can we do? Okay. But excellent question. All right. So these concepts are similar, but they're different. Okay, are you all understanding the distinction between the two? All right, okay, keep going, please. All right, keep going. All right, so these are 3 questions, and I've kind of touched on some of it. What are our results now? Jesus was not concerned about numbers in the same way we are. Jesus was not concerned about how many. Jesus was concerned about who. Now, this is not to say that we have to not be, you know, I think it's good to have some goal setting and some expectations and some numbers. Okay, so I think that's good. I think the Bible was intentional in saying 3,000. All that's good. But what Jesus was looking for was certain types of individuals that could be entrusted with the gospel message. Now, I actually left last week talking about Peter and how Peter, as a fisherman, would not have been looked upon as a thought leader. Because he was a fisherman, he would not have been the kind of guy that you see up in the synagogue sharing and lecturing and teaching and preaching. That would have been somebody else who the perception is they would be a little sharper. But what Peter had are some other aspects that made him the prime target to play this role. Now, part of that is, I'm sure that God the Son knows everything, so he can just kind of see. Which prophet was it that went to Jesse's sons and had Jesse bring up all of his sons, and he went through the line? Who can tell me who that prophet was? The prophet who? Samuel? Was it Samuel? Okay. And he was looking at all of them, and he said, hey, it ain't none of these guys. And then he told Jesse, he said, is this all your boy? He said, oh, I forgot about David, but he's out in the field tending to the flock. He said, go get him. So he brought him in. And when David came in so many words, he said, this is the one. This is the one. Now, in that story, we can do a lot of things. One of the things that we can see is we are often very poor at seeing the kind of people that God can really use in a mighty way. As a matter of fact, sociologically speaking, the more attractive you are, the easier it is to get certain jobs and certain promotions. So that's just a revealing of how carnal we are. But you know, God doesn't look at the same things that we look at. God's thoughts are not what? Our thoughts. God's ways are not what? Our ways. So when Jesus is trying to find somebody who can be instrumental in this new movement, he reaches out to somebody that's tough as nails. And that's Peter. Because it's going to take somebody like a fisherman to go after people day in and day out. Who was it that Peter was chiefly called to minister to? Was it the Gentiles? It was the Jews. Now, you talk about some stiff-necked, stubborn folk. Those Jewish people are some rough folk. Kind of remind me of Church of Christ folk. Amen. So that you know, who has God placed in your life that would be instrumental in bringing others to Christ? You often have to fight your ability to pigeonhole people and to think that, you know, this is beyond them. This is beyond. I mean, just kind of try to set aside that and say, who in our lives do we think could be instrumental in bringing others to Christ? And there are people in all of our lives. There are people right here at Figueroa who have a lot of Peter in them. And it's those people that can be invaluable. I mean, extremely valuable to this whole strategy of evangelizing like Jesus did. So it's important that you know that. Even when you're working through this process, one of the prayers that I think you ought to pray is to have more of a greater discernment about what we're really looking at. It's almost like some women and men who choose the wrong person to date, and they not only do it once, they do it twice. It's like Lionel Richie, the Commodore 3 times. I mean, man, they don't have no discernment. They can't look at a situation and say, that's good for me, that's bad for me. They use all. So part of what we want to do is we want to have a discerning eye. It's telling that after Jesus's temptation, after he comes out of that, the first thing that he does is get to work. And the first thing that he does is that he goes out and he recruits somebody. And he tells them, follow me, and I'm going to make you fishers of men. And you read that passage, and what they say is that they left their nets and they followed him. Now, let me just say this in passing, that scholars are a little confused about what that really meant. They left their nets and followed him. Some say that they literally did that. I don't know, because in the Jewish culture, if the man didn't work, that family had a rough time. So I'm more inclined to think that that passage points to a new priority in their lives. Somehow they still had to provide for their families, but now they made being with Jesus the central priority. I wish we had more details about that, but we don't. My point is this: churches that have tremendous resources, what are you spending your money on? If we ain't spending our money to disciple and bring others to Christ, what are we spending it on? And, this is more of a rhetorical question, but what are we spending it on? What is more important than the work that Peter and James and those guys are getting ready to do? I'm going to give you a revolutionary idea. Hawkins may never let me stand up here again. That's all right. What we said, we're going to hire 10 people, pay a part of their salary, and we want them to spend 20 hours down here working to develop this approach to take over the 10 surrounding blocks of the church. That might cost us, I don't know, let's say 10 people. Let's see. Let's just use a round number, $500,000. Now, most churches don't have that kind of money, and I really don't have any details about, really any other congregation as far as that goes. I'm just talking ideas about what it's going to take for us to do some of the things that we're going to be looking at. It's going to take different ways of thinking. Some of you all are retired. Your income, as far as that's concerned, is you're good. And the church may call upon you to maybe we take over the fellowship hall and we build cubicles, and we have 6 people that are down here every day. because we have retired principals, administrators, teachers, CNAs, nurses, physicians, business people who are good at administration. Do you really think that God gave you all that just so you could be successful out there? Do you really think that that is as far as God thought? Y'all think I'm crazy? Let us go back to the last slide, please. All right. So what are our results? What are we producing? What are the implications? The what are we producing piece, people get real sensitive about, because you know, we can think we're calling people out, and there's nobody calling people out. All we want to talk about is what have we produced here, let's just say the last 10 years. Maybe we come up with a form and we circulate it amongst our membership. And we have a way of organizing the data where we can see who we have and what we're doing. And we can have some kind of productivity ratio where we can look at a person and how long they've been here and correlate that to what they do. Some of this I've been a part of in different ways of doing this. For example, when I'm doing evangelism and I'm thinking about it, if we have, let's say, 32 baptisms and we track visitors, and maybe over the course of a year, we have 218 visitors and we have 32 baptisms. So there's a correlation between visitors and baptisms. So if I want 100 baptisms, how many visitors do we have to have? Okay, let me mention it again. So if we have 218 visitors and 32 baptisms, all right, that's what we did for last year. What if I want 100 baptisms? How many visitors do I need to have? I'm going to take 218 and I'm going to multiply it times 3. Because I multiplied my baptismal goal times 3. 32 times 3 is what? 96. Okay, so that means if we want 100 baptisms, we got to find a way to get over 600 people visiting. That's a way of looking at this environment and what we need to do. And maybe we set that out as a goal, and we have our members, everybody's going to take on bringing their part of the 600 or 700 visitors. That's what I mean when I talk about what are our results. You have to have people at the table who can think this way and who can really help us organize around these kinds of these types of ideas. And maybe you have a much better way. I hope so. I'm just trying to, get us to think. So when Jesus thought about impacting the world, he didn't call the whole world under him for those 3.5 years. He called a limited group of people. Now, of course, he could see down the annals of time, but he knew exactly who he needed at the table. And that's what he went after. And I'm saying we have to do the same today. That kind of energy and focus and creativity, that's what we need to see today. We cannot let you off the hook. We cannot let our preachers off the hook. We cannot let our elders off the hook. We cannot let our deacons off the hook. We cannot let our Sunday school teachers off the hook. We cannot let our members off the hook. Man, this stuff is so important. Do you not know the Christian Chronicle has been running a series, and I had them send me 50 copies of it. And when you came in back there, I still saw a few of them. So if you don't have a copy, many of you get them in the mail, but if you don't, then I got you a copy. If we ran out, I can get more. You can email them and tell them to put you on the list. But my colleague, I'm on the editorial board. I have an article in here, and Cheryl Mann, who's one of my colleagues, she's a retired English professor from Abilene, journalism professor, and she's done a series on the Church of Christ and how we were affected by the pandemic. Now, the most recent article she did is on a church that merged, which was my prompting to tell the story of Black people in these pages, which is why I'm glad I'm on the board. So they did that. But prior to that, it was white congregations primarily, and you talk about some sad stories. I think it's in this issue, maybe it's the last one. She was able to find out about the church, and she was there the last Sunday the church was in existence. That day they shut down. Now, why do you bring that up? I bring that up to tell you how important this is. See, people don't think that a church can close, but a church can close. Well, Brother Edmondson, the church is founded and it's going to be, I'm not saying that the church is going to go out of existence. I'm just saying in terms of what we're doing at this particular location, this is not an eternal situation. Maybe some churches need to close. I don't know. But if we don't get back to thinking about results and what we're producing, that's where we're headed. Now, is this very painful to think about? You better believe it is. Because people get all defensive and mad and upset, but this really not about you. This is about us creating an environment where our kids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids want to be here serving and worshiping God. And if not them, their peers, if not them, like-minded families in the neighborhood. That's what this is about. Now we're on that last one, implications. So, any questions before we wrap things up this morning and I give you a preview of where we're going next year? Yes, ma'am. I think we should walk and chew gum at the same time. I do. I mean, I'm very sensitive to people and just, why some people don't want to come back to the gathering. However, and I'm going to try to say this with maturity. We should not have to be chasing behind you, coming back to church. You've been around the Lord 20-some years. I'm just telling you that is a waste. If I'm not coming to church, it's a waste of the church's resources to come and pursue me. I'm very selfish. If I gotta have Brother Hawkins give me a call. If I want to hear my preacher's voice, and I'm not going to come until he calls me, how crazy does that sound? So yes, I do think that there ought to always be concern for those who have fallen, slipped away, struggling. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, that's been me at different moments in my life, and I'm grateful that people reached out and encouraged me. So I'm definitely not saying we shouldn't do that. I'm just saying we're only going to get so much value out of that. You really don't see the disciples leading a big restoration campaign. It don't mean we don't need to do it. I'm just saying the bulk of our time ought to be spent evangelizing them streets and evangelizing the friends and family communities that we are all connected to. And maybe we have a 10-year strategy and we have these 10 families, and we're going to work on evangelizing these 10 communities that all feed into the Figueroa congregation. I'm just saying, you got people here at our church who think like that. They do it every day. They're just not doing it here. And that's more of a reflection of the lack of skill of our leaders than it is anything. The members can only do what they're empowered and encouraged to do. So I hope what's happening is that you're thinking about yourself, your family, Fig, where we are, what we're doing, and how might things change, or what may the future look like. Now, the next week, which I'm actually going to get to what you were talking about, which is what I couldn't really say then, what I'm going to say now, is I'm going to talk through biblically some infrastructure type examples, and I'm going to try to bring that into this modern era. And I want to show you how they did evangelism. So one thing is to talk about, okay, this is where we need to be. That's what I've been doing. You know, I've been saying, you know, this is goal-oriented language, okay? But teachers often don't break it down and really show people how to do it, okay? And I'm gonna give you a preview. Your home, our homes, are still the number one place where discipleship and people coming to know the Lord can happen, will happen, should happen. In as early as Acts chapter 2, when you go back and look at that passage, you're going to see that they ate bread from house to house. The Lord's Supper in Matthew 26 took place in a house. The Lord's Supper in 1 Corinthians 11, we think that took place in a place like this. That was in somebody's home. So we'll talk about the home. We'll talk about Jerusalem. Let's have some good ideas. I think the good ideas about how we can make this practical today. So I want you to be thinking about how God can use you in all of this. See, one of my concerns is that I've lived long enough to see a lot of people pass away that we're having a tough time replacing. I call them oak trees. And oak trees in a church, they're that family that they got real high branches. And birds light in those branches. They build nests. They grow fruit. People can eat from that tree. They provide shade during the summer. A mature forest has a lot of oak trees. The problem is, in a congregation, our oak trees are transitioning on, and we're not replacing enough of them. So there has to be some intentionality about growing and developing and bringing up other families to take on that awesome responsibility. All right. So in my mind, it's just getting gooder. Any questions as we close? How much more time do I have, Brother Walker? Am I done? All right. Did he say that with an attitude? All right. So let's pray. Our great God above, we're so thankful for this morning. Grateful for learning and for the Bible and its ability to speak to our hearts and lives. Help us to think about Acts 2 and Matthew 4 as evangelistic strategies that can work in this era today. Help us to be used of God to develop both strategies and to find a meaningful way to contribute. We are so grateful and thankful for the many, many families that have gone on before us who have been part of the evangelism machine here at Figueroa. Many of us are where we are today because of the sacrifice and dedication. And we want to acknowledge that and to affirm that and to let those families know how much we appreciate them. As we will continue on with our learning and worshiping today, may our hearts be open to what you're seeking to say to us. In the name of Christ, we do pray. Amen.